When you step outside on a clear, cloudless night and look up, the sky lies to you. It presents a masterpiece of profound stillness, a tranquil tapestry of frozen light, anchored by the familiar silver disk of the moon and the faint, steady glow of neighboring planets. It feels safe, it feels incredibly distant. It feels like an empty museum where the exhibits are locked securely behind thick glass, completely disconnected from the ground beneath your feet. But this serene portrait is an optical illusion of the highest order. It is an evolutionary blindfold we wear just to maintain our sanity. If human eyes were suddenly tuned to see the full electromagnetic spectrum, the sheer, unadulterated violence of our immediate neighborhood would drive us to our knees. We are not drifting gently through a quiet, empty ocean. We are plunging headlong through an active cosmic hurricane. Right now, in this exact fraction of a second, the Earth is hurtling through a chaotic minefield of primordial shrapnel at over 67,000 miles per hour. We are tethered to a boiling, magnetically unstable sphere of plasma that is violently dragging our entire planetary system through the local interstellar cloud at nearly 500,000 miles per hour. It is a relentless, screaming trajectory toward the constellation of Hercules. Picture a midnight express train speeding through a pitch-black tunnel without headlights, while microscopic bullets and massive boulders graze the windows continuously. What we comfortingly call empty space is anything but empty. It is a churning, volatile medium. Our immediate orbit is thick with localized solar winds, rogue micrometeoroids traveling faster than any military artillery, and invisible walls of ionizing radiation. These are unseen torrents of energy that would dismantle the DNA in your cells in a matter of hours, if not for the fragile, fluctuating magnetic shield we blindly depend on. There is no perimeter fence at the edge of the atmosphere. There is no padding between us and the void. The vacuum pressing against the thin blue line of our sky is an actively hostile environment, an ocean of dark mechanics, subatomic friction, and lethal temperatures perfectly calibrated to erase human biology. The universe does not care if we survive the night. It owes us no explanations, yet its mechanical truths are waiting to be uncovered by those willing to look into the abyss without flinching. If you seek the truth in the dark, if you demand to understand the terrifying architecture of the cosmos we actually inhabit, subscribe and join us on this journey. We are going to tear down the comforting illusion of the night sky layer by layer until only the cold mechanical reality of our local space remains. For thousands of years, human civilization was constructed upon a monumental, collective delusion about the heavens. When our ancestors stood in the cold night and looked upward, they did not perceive an infinite, terrifying void spanning outwards into an unfathomable abyss. They saw a ceiling. The ancient human mind, desperate for order in a terrestrial world defined by plague, famine, and unpredictable predators, engineered a brilliant psychological defense mechanism. They gazed at the scattered pinpricks of light and decided they were embedded within the inside of a vast, rotating physical dome. This was the firmament, the crystalline spheres of classical antiquity, it was an architecture of profound comfort. It implied fundamentally that the Earth was the center of a locked room. We were safe, secure, and watched over by whatever divine forces resided on the other side of that opaque barrier. This geocentric illusion was not merely a philosophical comfort. It was a utilitarian necessity. It allowed us to invent timekeeping, map the shifting of the seasons, and plant crops with confidence. We built empires, navigated oceans, and organized societies relying entirely on the predictable, clockwork rotation of lights etched into a static sky. Our neurological wiring literally evolved to trust that the ground beneath our feet is solid and the sky above is a harmless canopy. Even today, despite decades of space exploration, your brain instinctively processes the night sky as a flat, two-dimensional backdrop. It is a stubborn biological limitation. We are simply not equipped on an evolutionary level to intuitively comprehend three-dimensional emptiness on a scale that profoundly defies terrestrial geometry. The depth of this intuition was so ingrained that early scholars went to agonizing mathematical lengths to protect it. When the planets, the objects they called wandering stars, refused to move in perfect circles across the sky, astronomers like Ptolemy did not abandon the concept of the crystalline ceiling. Instead, they invented epicycles. They imagined wheels within wheels, complex grinding gears in the sky, a desperate cosmic clockwork designed purely to maintain the illusion that the Earth was stationary and the heavens were mathematically perfect. For a millennium and a half, human intellect bound itself in geometric knots just to avoid the terrifying alternative that the Earth was moving and the sky was not a ceiling, but an open door leading out into a boundless dark. The concept of absolute direction dictated their reality. Heavy things fell toward the center of the universe, which was the mud of the earth, and ethereal things rose toward the divine perfection of the outer spheres. Space, in this view, was not a place you could go. It was not an environment you could survive in. It was a boundary condition of reality itself. The collapse of this comforting illusion did not happen overnight. It was slowly, painfully dismantled by the advent of optics and ultimately completely shattered by the cold, unforgiving logic of calculus and geometry. When the first rudimentary telescopes pierced the darkness, focusing on the moons of Jupiter and the jagged phases of Venus, the glass spheres cracked. Suddenly, there was no ceiling. There was only depth. A depth so profound it began to induce a kind of philosophical vertigo in the minds of those who dared to look through the ground lenses. Imagine the sheer existential terror of the 16th century scholar realizing for the first time that the Earth is not resting on a cosmic foundation. It is suspended in absolutely nothing. When Johannes Kepler spent years poring over the obsessive, meticulous observational data of Tycho Brahe, the horrifying truth emerged. The planets did not move in divine, perfect circles. They moved in stretched, deformed ellipses. They sped up as they whipped around the sun and slowed down as they drifted away. The heavens were not perfect. They were warped by unseen forces. Kepler's laws replaced a universe of divine, static architecture with a universe of ruthless, shifting mechanics. But it was Isaac Newton who delivered the final, crushing blow to human intuition. Newton stripped away the last remnants of the magical heavens and replaced them with the invisible chains of gravity. His revelation was conceptually brutal. He proved mathematically that the moon is not floating gently in the sky. It is falling. It is plummeting toward the Earth at every conceivable fraction of a second. The only reason it does not crash into our oceans, vaporizing the crust and ending all life, is that its sideways velocity is perfectly matched to the curvature of the Earth, allowing it to infinitely miss the ground. This is the truth of our environment. Orbital mechanics is not a state of serene floating. It is a state of perpetual screaming freefall. We are all falling, continuously, trapped in the immense gravitational well of the sun. The mathematics of the inverse square law dictate a terrifying reality. Gravity is an invisible tether stretching across millions of miles of nothingness, weakening but never truly vanishing. It holds massive spheres of boiling rock and frozen gas in a delicate high-speed choreography where a single massive kinetic interruption would result in planetary annihilation. Space is filled with these reaching, pulling, invisible vectors of force. Yet, even after the crystal spheres were discarded and the planets were set in motion, a new, equally pervasive myth took root in the human consciousness. The myth of the perfect vacuum. For centuries, classical physics assumed that the vast distances between the planets were simply empty containers, a silent, unfeeling stage devoid of actors, merely waiting for massive bodies to transit through it. The prevailing thought was that if you took a glass jar and pumped out every single molecule of air, you were left with pure nothingness. Space was perceived as the ultimate chilling manifestation of zero. Zero pressure, zero matter, zero energy. This is the intuition most of us still carry today when we close our eyes and imagine an astronaut drifting beyond the atmosphere. We picture a profound, dead silence, a serene emptiness, but the true nature of our immediate space violently rejects this sterile concept. 20th century physics took a microscopic scalpel to the void and discovered that the empty vacuum is a lie. When you strip away every molecule of gas, every speck of roaming dust, and block out every passing photon of light, you are not left with nothing. You are left with a seething, underlying reality. Modern physics reveals that space itself is a physical fabric composed of overlapping, vibrating quantum fields. It is a restless, boiling ocean of potential energy. Think of space not as an empty box, but as a tightly stretched drumhead covering the entire universe. Pluck it, and particles manifest. Even in the deepest, darkest pockets of interplanetary space, this fabric is never still. Virtual particles continuously tear themselves out of the underlying quantum foam, snap into existence for a trillionth of a second, and then annihilate each other in a relentless microstorm of creation and destruction. This is not philosophical poetry. It is a measurable mechanical truth, confirmed by the slight shifts in the energy levels of atoms. The silence of space is deafeningly loud if you have the mathematical instruments to listen to it. The emptiness between the Earth and the orbit of Mars is not a peaceful void. It is a pressurized, dynamic, and violently active medium. To truly shatter our terrestrial intuition, we must fundamentally redefine our geography. We must change what we mean when we say the solar system. When you look at a textbook diagram, you see neatly drawn concentric circles, with the sun sitting politely in the center, like a static light bulb illuminating a large, dark room. The reality is that the sun does not end at its visible surface. The blinding, incandescent sphere we see in the sky is merely the dense, glowing core of a much larger, invisible entity. The sun is constantly bleeding its own mass into the dark. Its extreme coronal temperatures cause its outer atmosphere to expand explosively outward, accelerating protons, electrons, and alpha particles to millions of miles per hour. This is the solar wind, and it is a ceaseless, raging gale that saturates what we mistakenly call empty space. You are not looking at the sun from a safe distance across an empty void. You are living inside its extended atmosphere. The space between the Earth and the Moon is permanently flooded with this lethal plasma. It is a highly charged, magnetically complex medium that interacts violently with anything it touches. When a spacecraft leaves the protective, invisible magnetic bubble of the Earth, it does not enter a quiet frontier. It plunges headlong into a radiation storm. It attempts to navigate a torrential river of stellar material. This is the baseline environment of our immediate space, a microscopic hypervelocity blizzard of solar debris that can shred the complex molecules of human DNA and scramble unshielded computer processors in a matter of hours. The sun's magnetic field lines twist, stretch, and snap, hurtling billions of tons of magnetized plasma across the void in coronal mass ejections. These invisible tidal waves crash against planetary magnetic fields, sparking geomagnetic storms that can induce massive electrical currents in the very bedrock of the Earth. We are not shielded by distance. We are deeply submerged in a turbulent stellar ocean that is actively trying to tear our atmosphere away. But the high-energy plasma is only the microscopic edge of the sword. The true, visceral terror of our immediate environment lies in the sheer, unforgiving physics of kinetic energy. Down here on Earth, enclosed by our thick atmosphere, we naturally associate danger with mass. A heavy object is dangerous, a falling boulder, a speeding truck. But in the frictionless vacuum of local space, mass is almost irrelevant. Velocity is the ultimate weapon. Because there is no air resistance to slow things down, no atmospheric friction to bleed away momentum, even the smallest grain of rock becomes an armor-piercing projectile. The mathematics of kinetic energy reveal a merciless truth. The destructive power of an object increases exponentially with the square of its speed. And in space, things move at speeds that completely break human intuition. To remain in low Earth orbit without falling back into the atmosphere, an object must travel at roughly 17,500 miles per hour. That is nearly 5 miles every single second. Our immediate orbit is an invisible highway littered with millions of pieces of primordial dust, shattered asteroids, and microscopic cometary debris. These fragments do not peacefully drift. They tear through the dark at velocities ranging from 20,000 to over 150,000 miles per hour. Imagine a flake of paint or a particle of silicate no larger than a grain of coarse sea salt, traveling at 10 times the speed of a high-powered rifle bullet. In the vacuum, this tiny speck possesses enough raw kinetic energy to instantly crater reinforced glass, vaporize upon impact, and tear through layers of aerospace metal plating. If you were floating in space, completely exposed, you would not hear them coming. There is no sound to warn you. You would simply be existing in the middle of a silent, chaotic crossfire, surrounded by billions of hypervelocity projectiles crisscrossing the darkness. Every satellite we launch, every delicate telescope we deploy to peer into the deep cosmos, operates in this state of constant, silent siege. Our engineers are forced to armor their instruments against an environment that is fundamentally designed by the laws of physics to degrade, irradiate, and destroy them. The calm, black backdrop of the night sky is an intricate lie, maintained entirely by our biological blindness to the wavelengths of extreme violence. To understand the true mechanical nature of our local space is to realize that we are fragile passengers, clinging to a rock, speeding through a microscopic war zone of radiation, kinetic shrapnel, and gravitational sinkholes. And yet, this is just the quiet, ordinary functioning of the inner solar system on a calm day. When we start looking closer at the specific architecture of this local void, when we measure the sheer scale of the debris fields and the terrifying anomalies lurking just beyond the orbit of Mars, the parameters of our survival shift from fragile to miraculous. As we extend our senses further into the darkness, peeling back the layers of this silent ocean, the incoming data begins to reveal a scale of mechanics that completely dwarfs human meaning. The numbers become so vast, the energies so extreme, that the very fabric of our local space begins to behave in ways that seem less like a habitat and more like a carefully constructed, inescapable labyrinth. To comprehend the true, crushing horror of our local environment, we must first completely dismantle the maps we have been handed. The diagrams of the solar system printed in textbooks and projected onto classroom walls are not just simplified. They are aggressive, fundamental lies. They compress the unfathomable vastness of our immediate space into a polite, manageable diagram that fits on a single piece of paper, placing planets neatly side by side like pieces on a chessboard. This visual compression neuters the most terrifying aspect of the universe, the sheer tyrannical volume of the empty dark. If we were to build a physically accurate model of the solar system, and we reduced the Earth to the size of a standard glass marble, the scale of isolation would immediately break your mind. On this scale, the Sun would be a massive sphere of incandescent gas 14 feet across, sitting roughly a quarter of a mile away. You would have to walk for 5 minutes just to bridge the gap between our star and our fragile marble. To find Jupiter, the largest planet in our neighborhood, you would have to walk for over 1.5 miles searching for an object no larger than a grapefruit drifting in the abyss. And to reach the frozen, silent realm of Pluto, you would need to trek across nearly 10 miles of absolute uninterrupted nothingness, looking for a speck of ice smaller than a grain of sand. The overwhelming majority of the solar system is not made of planets or moons or blazing stars. It is made of nothing. It is a staggering, suffocating expanse of void, where the distances between objects are so extreme that they render the concept of proximity entirely meaningless. In this arena of extreme distance, the ultimate speed limit of the universe becomes agonizingly slow. We think of the speed of light as instantaneous, a flash that bridges any gap in a heartbeat. But out here, in the cold architecture of our local space, light crawls. When a photon is born in the nuclear furnace of the Sun, it takes 8 agonizing minutes of sprinting across the vacuum at 186,000 miles per second just to strike the surface of the Earth. When we look at the Sun, we are looking at a ghost from 8 minutes in the past. If the Sun were to suddenly extinguish, we would continue to orbit blindly, bathed in its phantom warmth, oblivious to our impending doom for nearly 500,000 seconds. By the time that same light reaches the gas giant Jupiter, 43 minutes have bled away. By the time it brushes against the icy rings of Uranus, nearly 3 hours have passed. And when that tired, fading illumination finally strikes the outer edge of the planetary system, it has been traveling for over 4 hours. The inverse square law dictates that as light expands outward, its intensity drops exponentially. To an observer standing on the frozen methane plains of Pluto, the Sun is no longer a blinding disk that dominates the sky. It is merely an exceptionally bright star, offering no warmth, providing no comfort, casting long, razor-sharp shadows across a landscape, plunged in perpetual deep twilight. This is the reality of the outer solar system. It is a realm of profound thermal starvation, where the ambient temperature hovers just a few degrees above absolute zero, the theoretical limit where the very vibration of atoms grinds to a halt. But even this vast, cold emptiness is deceitful, because it is littered with the shattered, frozen remnants of planetary formation. Between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter lies the main asteroid belt, a region that Hollywood has consistently misrepresented as a chaotic, densely packed minefield of tumbling boulders where spacecraft must weave and dodge to survive. The mechanical truth of the asteroid belt is far more insidious. It is incredibly sparse. There are millions of rocks tumbling through this region, ranging from the size of pebbles to the dwarf planet Ceres, which is hundreds of miles across. Yet, the volume of space they occupy is so unimaginably large that if you were standing on the surface of an asteroid, in the middle of the belt, the nearest neighboring rock would likely be hundreds of thousands of miles away. It would be entirely invisible to the naked eye. You would stand on your silent, tumbling world, surrounded by a pitch-black sky, feeling utterly alone in the void. The only way we know these rocks exist is through the meticulous mechanical aggregation of faint photons. The process of mapping this dark, scattered architecture requires a patience and a mathematical rigor that borders on madness. When astronomers hunt for these silent drifters, they do not look through eyepieces. They utilize massive, ground-based observatories equipped with mirrors polished to a tolerance of a fraction of the wavelength of light. These colossal instruments stare into the blackness, exposing highly sensitive digital sensors for hours at a time, collecting a meager trickle of sunlight that has traveled hundreds of millions of miles, struck a charcoal-dark piece of primordial rubble, and bounced back across the void to Earth. The computers then compare these enormous digital plates, searching for a single, microscopic cluster of pixels that has shifted its position against the static backdrop of ancient, distant stars. This mechanical hunt was born from a profound mathematical crisis in the early 19th century. When the astronomer Giuseppe Piazzi first spotted a faint moving point of light that we now know as Ceres, he only observed it for a few weeks before it slipped behind the glare of the sun, completely lost to the astronomical community. The data he had collected was terrifyingly thin, just a handful of angular coordinates, a tiny fragmented arc of a circle traced across the sky. The most brilliant minds of the era believed the object was lost forever in the overwhelming volume of space. It was impossible to predict where it would emerge from behind the sun using classical methods. But Carl Friedrich Gauss, a mathematician of terrifying intellect, looked at those few meager dots of data and invented an entirely new method of orbital calculation. He developed the mathematics of least squares approximation, a brutal, computationally exhausting technique that allowed him to trace the invisible geometry of the solar system from the faintest, most incomplete whispers of data. He mathematically willed the invisible orbit into existence, calculating exactly where the telescopes should point to find the lost rock when it emerged from the sun's glare. And when the telescopes turned to those precise, mathematically ordained coordinates, the rock was exactly there. This is the foundation of our local cosmology. It is not built on casually looking out the window. It is built on grinding, relentless mathematics applied to the faintest traces of reflected light in a fundamentally dark room. As we push our sensors further out, past the giant planets, we encounter the Kuiper Belt, a vast ring-shaped debris field of frozen volatiles, methane, ammonia, and water ice. This is the true deep freeze of the solar system. To understand this region, we sent the New Horizons probe, a machine the size of a grand piano, hurtling outward at over 36,000 miles per hour. The engineering required to operate in this extreme environment borders on the miraculous. Out there, sunlight is far too weak to power solar panels. The probe survives solely because it carries a decaying heart of radioactive plutonium, slowly generating enough heat to keep its internal circuitry from freezing solid in the deep space vacuum. When New Horizons flew past the Kuiper Belt object Arrokoth, a bizarre fused mass of ice that looked like a flattened snowman, it was 4 billion miles from Earth. The data it collected had to be transmitted back to us using a radio antenna, operating on a fraction of the power of a standard light bulb. These radio waves, encoding high-resolution images of an alien world, expanded outwards, growing infinitely weaker as they crossed the 4 billion-mile abyss. By the time they washed over the Earth, the signal was so faint it was barely distinguishable from the background microwave radiation of the universe. To catch this whisper, humanity had to build colossal parabolic dishes in the deserts of Earth, massive ears of steel and aluminum, straining to listen to a robotic probe falling forever into the dark. And yet, the Kuiper Belt is just the shoreline of an even grander, more terrifying ocean. Beyond it lies the theoretical boundary of the Oort cloud, a spherical shell of trillions of icy mountains encompassing the entire solar system, extending outwards for nearly a light year. At this extreme distance, the gravitational tether of our Sun is so diluted, so incredibly weak, that it is merely a theoretical suggestion of a bond. These frozen cometary bodies drift in the agonizing cold, suspended on the very razor's edge of interstellar space. They are barely held by the Sun's gravity. The slightest perturbation, the microscopic gravitational tide of the galactic plane, or the distant slow passage of a neighboring star thousands of years from now, is enough to shatter that fragile bond. An icy mountain is nudged, its orbital velocity drops by a fraction of a millimeter per second, and it begins to fall. It embarks on a slow, silent plunge toward the inner solar system, a gravitational death spiral that will take hundreds of thousands of years to complete, only accelerating as it feels the pulling grip of the Sun grow stronger, eventually flaring into a brilliant comet in our skies, before either being flung out into the void forever or plunging into the Sun's corona. This delicate, precarious balance of the outer solar system implies a closed, isolated ecosystem. But in the autumn of 2017, the instrument staring into the dark recorded an event that completely shattered that illusion. The Pan-STARRS telescope in Hawaii, a machine designed to scan the entire sky continuously for near-Earth objects, registered an anomaly. It detected a point of light moving with a velocity that immediately broke the established mathematical rules of our local space. The object was plunging into the inner solar system at over 57,000 miles per hour, but it was not falling from the Oort cloud. As orbital dynamicists tracked its path and calculated its trajectory, the geometry revealed a cold, undeniable truth. The object was not traveling on an ellipse, the closed loop that binds everything born within our solar system. It was traveling on a hyperbola. The mathematics dictated that its excess velocity was simply too great. It possessed an energy state that no gravitational interaction with Jupiter or the Sun could have naturally imparted to it. It was named Oumuamua. It was the first confirmed macroscopic object to enter our solar system from the deep interstellar void. It was a ghost ship sailing through our waters. As telescopes around the globe desperately swiveled to track it before it vanished, the data returned was deeply unsettling. The light curve of the object, the rhythmic brightening and dimming as it tumbled end over end in the vacuum, was extreme. It suggested an object that was not spherical or irregular like a typical asteroid, but highly elongated, perhaps 10 times longer than it was wide, like a colossal battered spear tumbling through the dark. Or perhaps it was shaped like a flat, rigid disk, but the geometry of its shape was not the most terrifying aspect of the anomaly. As Oumuamua swung around the Sun and began its escape back out into the deep void, it accelerated. It began to speed up, deviating slightly but measurably from the path that pure Newtonian gravity dictated it should follow. In a typical comet, this non-gravitational acceleration is easy to explain. The heat of the Sun vaporizes the surface ice, creating jets of gas that act like tiny rocket thrusters, pushing the comet off its gravitational course. But Oumuamua showed absolutely no signs of outgassing. Deep space infrared observatories stared at it and detected no dust coma, no tail, no vaporized carbon molecules. It was a completely dry, seemingly dead rock, yet it was accelerating away from the Sun as if pushed by an unseen hand. The mechanical explanations ranged from the bizarre to the unsettling. Was it a highly porous, ultra-low-density fractal structure of dust, so incredibly light that the mere pressure of the Sun's radiation, the physical impact of photons, was enough to push it like a sail? Or was it something structurally solid, an architecture polished by billions of years of interstellar friction? The data was infuriatingly incomplete, leaving us with a mathematical shadow that slipped past our senses and disappeared back into the darkness, reminding us that our local space is completely porous, constantly bombarded by invisible things migrating between the stars. The realization that our solar system is open to the interstellar ocean is compounded by an even darker mystery lurking within our own gravitational borders. As we trace the orbits of the most distant known objects in the Kuiper Belt, minor planets with names like Sedna, we find that their paths are profoundly warped. These frozen worlds take over 10,000 years to circle the Sun, swinging out into the deep void before returning. But when astronomers map the perihelion points, the closest approaches of these extreme trans-Neptunian objects, they are not randomly distributed, they are clustered. They are all being dragged toward one specific quadrant of the sky. The orbital mechanics suggest this is not a coincidence. The mathematics of probability scream that an invisible architecture is shaping the outer dark. Computer simulations of billions of years of orbital evolution point to a singular, massive culprit. The data implies the existence of a ghost world, a theoretical Planet 9 lurking far beyond the reach of our current telescopic vision. The mathematical models suggest it is an ice giant, perhaps 5 to 10 times the mass of the Earth, tracing a massive, eccentric orbit that takes 20,000 years to complete. It is so unimaginably far away that any sunlight reaching it is too weak to bounce back to our senses. It emits almost no infrared heat. It is a massive planetary body hiding in plain sight, completely cloaked by the sheer, crushing distance of the outer solar system. We cannot see it. We can only feel its gravitational footprint, a phantom gravity well silently orchestrating the movements of the frozen debris at the edge of our world. We are left staring into a void that is mathematically crowded, but visually empty. We are analyzing the ripples on the surface of a pitch-black pond, trying to deduce the exact shape and mass of the monster moving beneath the water. And as we push our mathematics harder, trying to resolve these anomalies and force the universe to make mechanical sense, we run headfirst into a conceptual wall. The deeper we dig into the physics governing this vast, violent architecture, the more the fundamental rules of reality begin to fracture. The deeper we dig into the physics governing this vast, violent architecture, the more the fundamental rules of reality begin to fracture. We have spent the last century constructing two magnificent, towering monuments of human intellect to explain the mechanics of the cosmos. On one side, we have the theory of general relativity, Albert Einstein's masterpiece. It is the undisputed king of the macroscopic world. It governs the slow, majestic dance of planets, the crushing gravity of stars, and the overall curvature of the universe itself. On the other side, we have quantum mechanics, the bizarre probabilistic rulebook that dictates the behavior of the microscopic world. It governs the volatile ocean of subatomic particles, the nuclear fires burning at the core of the sun, and the invisible quantum foam that fills the vacuum. Both of these theories have been tested to unimaginable levels of precision. Both are fundamentally, undeniably correct in their respective domains. And yet, when we attempt to force them to speak to each other, when we try to unify them to understand the deepest truths of our immediate space, they violently reject one another. They produce a mathematical paradox so profound that it implies our fundamental understanding of reality is entirely broken. The impasse begins with the very nature of gravity. Before Einstein, we intuitively felt gravity as a magnetic pull, an invisible rope tethering objects together across the void. General relativity obliterated that concept. It revealed that space is not a static, empty stage. Space and time are physically woven together into a single flexible fabric called space-time. Massive objects do not pull on each other. They warp the geometry of this fabric. Picture a heavy bowling ball resting on a tightly stretched trampoline. The ball creates a deep depression in the material. If you roll a marble across the trampoline, it will not travel in a straight line. It will curve inward, spiraling toward the depression. The marble is not being pulled by the bowling ball. It is simply following the straightest possible path across a profoundly curved surface. This is the mechanical reality of our solar system. The Earth is continually moving in a straight line, but the colossal mass of the Sun has warped the space-time around it into a deep, invisible sinkhole. We are endlessly rolling along the curved rim of that sinkhole. But this elegant geometric truth comes with a terrifying psychological cost. Because space and time are the same fabric, you cannot warp one without warping the other. General relativity dictates that gravity fundamentally breaks the absolute nature of time. Time is not a universal clock ticking away smoothly in the background of the universe. It is a physical dimension, and it is entirely relative to your proximity to mass. The closer you are to a massive object, the deeper you are in its gravitational well. The slower time ticks for you relative to an observer further out. This is not a biological trick of perception. It is a mechanical distortion of reality. A clock placed on the surface of the Earth physically ticks slower than a clock orbiting in the vacuum of space. The GPS satellites navigating your car right now must have their internal clocks mathematically adjusted by fractions of a second every day, just to compensate for the fact that time is moving faster in their orbit than it is on the ground. If they did not account for this temporal distortion, the navigation grids would fail within hours. We are living at the bottom of a gravitational gravity well, and our time is continually being compressed. This warping of time becomes infinitely more extreme as we push toward the theoretical limits of mass and density. And this is precisely where our physics encounters a catastrophic wall. When we take the elegant equations of general relativity and try to apply them to the absolute extreme environments of the cosmos, such as the microscopic, infinitely dense center of a black hole or the very first fraction of a second of the universe's birth, the mathematics completely collapse. The equations attempt to describe a point of zero volume and infinite density. In the cold, rigorous language of mathematics, infinity is not a number, it is an error message. It is the universe telling us that our framework has failed. It signifies a complete breakdown of causality and logic. General relativity demands a smooth, continuous surface of space-time. It requires reality to be predictable and exact. But when we zoom in on the microscopic fabric of that surface, we enter the domain of quantum mechanics, a realm that outright forbids smoothness and certainty. The quantum world is inherently jittery, chaotic, and governed by strict probabilities rather than absolute locations. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is not a statement about the limits of our measuring instruments. It is a fundamental law of reality. It dictates that you can never simultaneously know the exact position and the exact momentum of a subatomic particle. The more tightly you pin down where a particle is, the more violently uncertain its velocity becomes. If you try to constrain a particle to an incredibly small space, its energy fluctuates wildly. Now attempt to force these two realities together. Imagine zooming in on the smooth, curved trampoline of space-time until you are looking at it at the Planck length, the absolute smallest measurable scale of reality, roughly a billionth of a billionth of a billionth of a centimeter across. At this infinitesimal scale, the smooth geometry of relativity is torn apart by the violent uncertainty of quantum mechanics. The fabric of space ceases to be a continuous sheet. It becomes a roiling, boiling froth of microscopic wormholes and temporary black holes snapping in and out of existence. It is a state of total geometric chaos where the concepts of up, down, before, and after completely disintegrate. Our mathematics cannot function in this environment. The equations literally spit out infinities that cancel each other out, leaving us with nonsensical gibberish. We are entirely locked out of understanding the deepest layer of the environment we inhabit. This theoretical collision produces the single greatest embarrassment in the history of modern physics. It is a paradox known as the vacuum catastrophe. To understand this failure, we must attempt to calculate the energy of nothing. According to quantum mechanics, empty space is never truly empty. Because of the uncertainty principle, the vacuum is filled with invisible virtual particles that briefly borrow energy from the universe, blink into existence, and annihilate each other a fraction of a second later. If you use the incredibly successful laws of quantum mechanics to calculate the total energy of all these microscopic explosions happening in a single cubic meter of empty space, the math produces a number. It calculates the inherent energy density of the vacuum. But there is a catastrophic problem. When we look out into the cosmos and measure the actual physical expansion of the universe using general relativity, we can observe the real-world energy of the vacuum pushing the galaxies apart. When we compare the number predicted by our quantum mathematics against the number we physically observe in the cold dark of space, they do not match. They do not even slightly disagree. The theoretical quantum calculation is larger than the observed reality, by a factor of 1 followed by 120 zeros. It is a discrepancy so mind-bendingly vast that there is no analogy in human experience to capture it. It is the equivalent of guessing the weight of the entire observable universe, and being wrong by the weight of a single grain of sand, but reversed. If the quantum mathematics were actually true, the energy of the vacuum would be so overwhelmingly dense that it would exert a gravitational force powerful enough to instantly crush the entire universe into a microscopic point. And yet, here we are, orbiting a star, looking out at a gentle, expanding void. We possess the two most rigorously tested, highly successful mathematical frameworks in the history of human thought. And when we ask them the simplest possible question, how much energy is in an empty box, they produce a contradiction that shatters our understanding of reality. We are flying blindly through a cosmos built on a foundation we fundamentally misunderstand. This profound theoretical failure is mirrored by an equally insurmountable physical barrier. We look up at the stars and dream of crossing the terrifying distances we have measured. We imagine engineering engines capable of conquering the void. But our local space enforces a strict, unbreakable quarantine. The speed limit of the universe is not an engineering challenge. It is not a technological hurdle that we can eventually overcome with better fuel or more advanced materials. The speed of light is a fundamental, structural property of the space-time fabric itself. It is the maximum rate at which causality can propagate. It is the maximum speed at which any information, any force, or any physical consequence can travel from one point in the universe to another. Think of it as the ultimate ping rate, the absolute latency limit of the cosmic server. To understand why we are permanently locked below this speed, we must return to the brutal mechanics of relativity. As an object accelerates through space, its kinetic energy increases. But Einstein's equations reveal a dark caveat. Energy and mass are fundamentally the same thing, two sides of the same coin. As you pump more energy into a spacecraft to make it go faster, you are proportionally increasing its relativistic mass. At low speeds, like a rocket traveling to Mars, this increase in mass is so microscopic it is virtually undetectable. But as you push a spacecraft to a significant fraction of the speed of light, the mathematics become terrifyingly exponential. The faster you go, the heavier the ship becomes. The heavier the ship becomes, the more energy you need to accelerate it further. This creates a vicious, inescapable feedback loop. To push an object with mass to the absolute speed of light would require an infinite amount of energy. It would require more energy than exists in the entire observable universe. You would become infinitely massive, frozen in time, requiring a force that cannot exist to move you a single inch further. We are physically trapped in a bubble of slow causality. The nearest star to our solar system is Proxima Centauri, sitting 4¼ light-years away. If we could magically build a ship that travels at 99% the speed of light, a technological feat bordering on the impossible, it would still take over 4 years to reach it from the perspective of the engineers on Earth. But for the astronauts inside the ship, the paradoxes of space-time would exact a heavy psychological toll. Because they are moving so incredibly fast, time for them would slow down to a crawl. The distance to the star would mechanically compress, shortening the physical journey. They might experience the trip as lasting only a few months, yet they are trading speed for time. By the time they return to Earth, decades or centuries might have passed. Everyone they knew would be dead. To travel across the cosmic ocean is to permanently abandon your timeline. It is a one-way ticket to a future you cannot relate to, and even if we resign ourselves to sublight speeds, the void itself throws up microscopic, violent barriers. Space is entirely saturated with a lethal, invisible crossfire known as cosmic rays. These are not rays of light. They are subatomic particles, protons and atomic nuclei, stripped of their electrons and accelerated to speeds that defy planetary logic. The majority of these particles are forged in the explosive death throes of distant stars shot out across the galaxy by supernovae. But there are some particles, the ultra-high-energy cosmic rays, that possess a kinetic violence that breaks our mathematical models. In the late 20th century, detectors on Earth registered the impact of a single subatomic particle plunging into our atmosphere from the deep void. It was just a solitary proton, but the energy it carried was inconceivable. This single microscopic speck was traveling so close to the absolute speed limit of the universe that it hit the atmosphere with the kinetic energy of a baseball thrown by a professional pitcher, a single proton carrying the macroscopic force of a dense, heavy sphere. It was dubbed the "Oh my God" particle because the physics required to accelerate a particle to that speed is profoundly terrifying. To achieve that level of energy, a proton would need to be accelerated continuously by a magnetic field spanning the diameter of an entire galaxy. We have absolutely no idea what monstrous, violent architecture in the deep universe is capable of functioning as a particle accelerator of that magnitude. Furthermore, the existence of these ultra-fast particles violates a theoretical barrier known as the Greisen-Zatsepin-Kuzmin limit. The mathematics dictate that a proton traveling that fast cannot cross vast intergalactic distances. The universe is flooded with the cold, faint microwave radiation left over from the Big Bang. To a particle moving at the speed of the Oh my God particle, these harmless microwaves appear highly blue-shifted, slamming into the proton like a wall of high-energy gamma rays. The friction of the vacuum itself should bleed the proton of its energy long before it reaches Earth. And yet, they arrive. They strike our detectors, carrying impossible energy, suggesting physics beyond our current comprehension. They are physical proof that our models of acceleration, of vacuum resistance, and of the maximum violence the universe can generate are fundamentally incomplete. We are surrounded by a medium we cannot map perfectly, governed by laws that contradict each other, and bombarded by microscopic shrapnel whose origins we cannot explain. Every time we attempt to push our understanding to the absolute edge, every time we try to unify the vast gravitational sinkholes with the jittery quantum foam, the universe responds by breaking the equations. The barrier is not just distance, and it is not just the lethal radiation of the solar wind. The ultimate barrier is the architecture of reality itself. We are forced to navigate a solar system locked within a mathematical paradox, staring at a horizon of cosmic limits we cannot cross, governed by rules we know are flawed, waiting for the dark to reveal. We are a species that evolved to understand seasons, lifetimes, and millennia. We measure permanence in stone monuments and historical records, projecting our brief, localized experience onto the vast machinery of the cosmos. But when we apply this terrestrial chronometry to the mechanical reality of our local space, we realize our clocks are entirely delusional. We are biological flashes, sparks that exist for a fraction of a millisecond on a stage where the actors operate on scales of hundreds of millions of years. This severe mismatch in temporal perception is the deepest, most insidious consequence of the cosmic architecture we have uncovered. Because we cannot feel the slow grinding shifts in orbital mechanics or the invisible accumulation of cosmic debt, we operate under the catastrophic assumption that tomorrow will be structurally identical to today. It is the psychological equivalent of building a paper house on the fault line of a slumbering tectonic plate and mistaking the profound silence for stability. The mathematics of celestial mechanics, however, guarantee that the silence is temporary. Our entire solar system is not a stable, repeating loop of planetary perfection. It is a chaotic, unbalanced system, slowly winding down, governed by the cold, unforgiving laws of thermodynamics. Every orbit, every rotation, every microscopic interaction with the solar wind bleeds a tiny fraction of kinetic energy from the system. We are trapped in an incredibly complex, slowly degrading clockwork mechanism where the gears are made of gas and rock and the invisible springs are actively losing their tension. The consequence of this degradation is not an immediate, fiery apocalypse, but a creeping mechanical inevitability that will slowly strangle the conditions for life. The moon, the familiar anchor of our night sky and the engine of our oceanic tides, is not a permanent fixture. It is stealing rotational momentum from the Earth. The math describing this interaction is simple, brutal, and undeniable. Every single year, the moon spirals approximately 1.5 inches further away into the dark. It is a slow, silent abandonment. Millions of years from now, our descendants, if they still exist, will look up and see a shrunken, distant rock, utterly incapable of covering the sun during an eclipse. The majestic tides that churned our oceans will freeze into sluggish, stagnant ripples. The rotational axis of our planet, currently stabilized by the heavy gravitational tether of our large satellite, will lose its anchor. It will begin to wobble violently under the competing gravitational pulls of Jupiter and the Sun. The predictable seasons that allowed agriculture to flourish and civilization to take root will collapse into a chaotic, lethal oscillation of extreme, shifting climates. We are living in a narrow temporary window of mechanical grace, an orbital anomaly that is actively, continuously correcting itself toward a more hostile, uninhabitable equilibrium. But the slow decay of our planetary neighborhood is a trivial, localized concern compared to the absolute terror implied by the vacuum catastrophe we discovered at the theoretical edge of our physics. The realization that empty space contains an incomprehensible amount of intrinsic energy is not just a frustrating mathematical puzzle. It is the silent engine of our ultimate, permanent isolation. We have named this unseen force dark energy, a placeholder term for a fundamental architecture we are completely blind to. Dark energy does not interact with our matter. It does not pull on our ships, and it does not tear at our planets. It pushes. It actively manufactures more empty space out of nothing. Picture the universe not as an expanding balloon, but as a colossal three-dimensional grid that is actively inserting new squares of distance between every existing object. For billions of years, the crushing gravity of the matter in the universe fought a desperate tug-of-war against this expansion, slowing it down, allowing massive galaxies to form and stars to ignite. But roughly 5 billion years ago, around the exact time our sun was coalescing from a cloud of dead stellar ash, the density of matter diluted enough that gravity lost the war forever. The expansion of the universe stopped slowing down. It began to accelerate. The space between the galaxies is stretching faster and faster, driven by an invisible mechanism that grows exponentially more powerful as the volume of the void increases. The hidden consequence of this accelerating expansion is a future of absolute, unmitigated darkness. Because the expansion of the underlying fabric of space is not governed by the cosmic speed limit of light, distant galaxies are currently being carried away from us faster than their light can ever hope to travel back across the growing abyss. They are crossing an invisible, expanding threshold known as the cosmic event horizon. Every single second you breathe, millions of stars drop out of the observable universe entirely. They simply vanish from our potential reality. Their light will never reach our telescopes. Their gravitational influence is permanently severed. If we wait long enough, the accelerating void will push all other galaxies beyond this horizon. The sky will be violently stripped of its deep field tapestry. Future civilizations, born into this degraded, hollowed-out epoch, will look through their most powerful observatories and see absolutely nothing but the local, dying remnants of our immediate galactic neighborhood. They will have no physical evidence, no trace photons to suggest that the wider universe ever existed. They will deduce through entirely logical and rigorous scientific observation that their lonely, decaying island of stars is the entirety of creation. The history of the cosmos is actively, physically erasing itself, leaving us stranded in an ocean that is quietly destroying all the maps. This cosmic erasure dictates that our local space, this violent, microscopic war zone of our solar system, is not a launching pad for a grand galactic empire. It is a quarantine zone and the doors are slowly locking from the outside. If we cannot break the speed of light, if we cannot navigate the lethal radiation and the hypervelocity shrapnel of the interstellar medium, we are permanently, inextricably bound to the fate of our local star. And the sun, the nuclear furnace that we worship as the immortal source of all energy, is a ticking time bomb governed by a terrifyingly precise mathematical fuse. The sun maintains its shape through a brutal, ongoing war between two absolute opposing forces. Gravity is constantly trying to crush the star inward, while the explosive outward pressure of millions of nuclear detonations per second tries to blow it apart. For 4.5 billion years, this war has been a violent stalemate. But the sun's fuel is finite. Deep in its crushing core, it is fusing hundreds of millions of tons of hydrogen into helium every single second. As the hydrogen depletes, the core becomes denser, hotter, and more desperate. The mathematics of stellar evolution offer absolutely no reprieves or exceptions. In roughly 1 billion years, the sun's luminosity will increase by 10%. This sounds like a negligible shift, a minor adjustment in the cosmic thermostat. But for the fragile, delicate biology of Earth, it is a planetary death sentence. That 10% increase will pump enough excess thermal energy into our atmosphere to trigger an unstoppable runaway greenhouse effect. The oceans will begin to boil into steam, thickening the atmosphere, trapping even more heat. The surface will be sterilized, physically mirroring the hellish pressure cooker environment of Venus today. The rock will remain, silently orbiting in the dark, stripped of everything that made it unique. But the mechanics of the sun's demise do not stop at sterilization. As the core finally exhausts its hydrogen, the inward crush of gravity will momentarily win. The core will collapse, igniting the heavier helium ash in a violent, catastrophic flash. This sudden, immense burst of energy will blast the sun's outer layers outward, transforming it into a bloated red giant. The star will swell to hundreds of times its current size. It will consume the orbit of Mercury. It will vaporize Venus, and its terrifying, boiling plasma atmosphere will stretch all the way out to graze the orbit of Earth. The sky will not be dark. It will be a solid, oppressive wall of crimson fire filling the entire horizon, a blinding physical manifestation of our trapped state. Even if humanity somehow survives this local apocalypse, even if we engineer colossal armored arcs to drift out into the freezing twilight of the Kuiper Belt, feeding off the faint trickle of dying nuclear power, we cannot escape the fundamental overarching law that governs the hidden architecture of all reality. The second law of thermodynamics, entropy. The universe is not just expanding, it is dissolving. It is a grand, unimaginably complex mechanism that is actively unwinding toward a state of maximum disorder and zero usable energy. Every time a star burns, every time a black hole swallows a planet, every time a microscopic virtual particle snaps in and out of the quantum vacuum, the total entropy of the system increases. Energy is never lost, but it is rendered useless. It is smeared out evenly across the expanding dark. The ultimate hidden consequence of our existence is that we are swimming against an unstoppable, universal tide. Biology, civilization, thought, and engineering are all temporary, localized pockets of order built entirely on borrowed time. We organize matter into cities and circuitry, but the immense thermodynamic cost of that organization is radiated out into the void as waste heat, only accelerating the overall degradation of the cosmos. The mathematics of entropy point directly to a distant, unfathomable future, where the last stars have exhausted their fuel and flickered out, leaving behind a pitch-black graveyard of cooling white dwarfs, silent neutron stars, and colossal, hungry black holes. And then, as the eons drag on, even the black holes will begin to die. Through the excruciatingly slow theoretical process of Hawking radiation, these impossibly dense singularities will slowly evaporate over trillions upon trillions of years, bleeding their mass back into the vacuum until they disappear in a final, weak flash of energy. Eventually, there will be no matter left. There will be no light. There will be no heat. The expanding fabric of space-time will stretch so far and become so dilute that the distance between any two subatomic particles will be greater than the current size of the entire observable universe. The temperature will drop perfectly to absolute zero. Time itself will cease to have any mechanical meaning because there will be no events, no moving parts, no changes in state to measure it by. A universe frozen in a state of maximum entropy is functionally indistinguishable from a universe that does not exist at all. We are not citizens of a grand, eternal empire of light. We are fleeting anomalies trapped in a localized pocket of declining energy, staring out at an environment that is mathematically engineered to eventually erase every trace of our existence, leaving absolutely nothing behind but an endless, cold, and expanding silence. This is the architecture we are permanently bound to. When we finally strip away the comforting mythology of the night sky, when we look past the ingrained illusion of the crystalline spheres and the arrogant assumption of a static, welcoming cosmos, we are left with a staggering, undeniable mechanical truth. We are not the designated protagonists of this universe. We are an accidental byproduct of a highly improbable chemical reaction, clinging desperately to a fading ember in a tiny, quarantined corner of a fundamentally hostile void. The tyrannical scale of the machinery operating around us, the microscopic, hyper-velocity shrapnel, the crushing gravity wells, the accelerating repulsion of dark energy, and the inevitable thermodynamic decay, renders our entire collective history mathematically insignificant. Every terrestrial empire we have ever built, every war we have ever fought over imaginary lines, every philosophical revelation we have painstakingly deduced has occurred on a fragile speck of silicate plummeting through an irradiated silent battlefield. The universe does not observe us. It does not pause to watch us decipher its paradoxes, and it possesses no physical mechanism to care if we survive the freezing dark of the interstellar winter or perish in the expanding plasma fire of our dying star. The void is devoid of malice, just as it is devoid of mercy. It is simply a blind, grinding engine governed by inexorable physics, moving forward without a designer, without a conscience, and entirely without a purpose. Our deepest biological instinct is to rebel against this crushing insignificance. Our neurology demands that we inject meaning into the absolute emptiness, that we draw arbitrary geometric lines between the chaotic scatter of ancient dying photons and call them constellations. We look up at the lethal abyss and actively convince ourselves it is a beautiful, peaceful ceiling simply because the alternative is a psychological burden too massive to carry. But the mathematics offer absolutely no such comfort. The equations do not lie, they do not negotiate, and they do not apologize. They merely describe a reality that is violently, permanently indifferent to whether human eyes are open to witness it. To gaze into the night sky with total clarity is to accept this ultimate, terrifying isolation. It is to acknowledge that the solid ground beneath your feet is not a permanent sanctuary, but a fragile temporary vessel navigating a vast dark ocean that is methodically dismantling itself. The starlight we see is merely an ancient, decaying echo of a violent past. The warmth we feel is a fleeting mechanical anomaly. There is no rescue fleet coming from the deep interstellar dark, no hidden meaning waiting to be decoded, and absolutely no escape from the relentless thermodynamic clock ticking steadily toward the absolute end of all structure. We exist purely in the infinitesimal margin of error between a volatile quantum foam and an eternal freeze. We are brief, conscious witnesses to a mechanical tragedy of unfathomable proportions. We are permitted just enough time to open our eyes, to measure the crushing weight of the darkness, to calculate the velocity of our own demise, and to fully understand the staggering, suffocating emptiness of the immediate space that surrounds us. And then the physics will simply proceed. The cosmic equations will balance themselves out in the dark. The long silent night will effortlessly reclaim the brief chemical flicker of our awareness, leaving absolutely nothing behind but the cold, perfect, uninterrupted geometry of the void.